US media reporting that Ukraine has apparently accepted the American peace proposal. Let's talk to our international correspondent Alex Rossi and our defence and security analyst, Professor Michael Clark, with me in the studio here. So, Alex, to you first of all. So this is, it seems like we've moved forwards, according to American media, but we're not clear whether this is just a slight embellishment on what we knew last night. Tell us where we are with what we know about what Ukraine has agreed to.
Well, it is all fairly unclear. What is clear is that President Zelensky and the Ukrainians are in a difficult position, obviously have been for 11 years since the Russians invaded Crimea and then the full-scale invasion. But this appears to be the answer to what Trump is putting forwards with his initiative. We're hearing, I'll just read you these lines, Rustem Umerov, the National Security Advisor, and a US official say that there is now an understanding on a proposal that has been reached, but details still need to be worked out. So let's rewind a little bit. The 28-point peace plan that the Americans kind of sort of sidelined everybody with when they came out with it. Discussions in Geneva. Those discussions then led, we think, to a 19-point peace plan. The Ukrainians were saying after those meetings that they had kind of agreed to that. And now this appears to be confirmation of that. But of course, the big question in all of this is, will the Russians agree to the changed text on the 28-point peace plan? The likelihood is that that isn't going to happen. We've already heard from the Kremlin that anything that's acceptable to the Europeans would not be acceptable to the Russians. Their maximalist demands, of course, will have been watered down. So they are unlikely to go for it. So what we are seeing is diplomacy about how to deal with Donald Trump's diplomacy. The Ukrainians know that they cannot flatly say no to Donald Trump. They need to flatter him. They need to engage with the process. That's what seems to be happening here. They, of course, will hope that the Russians will reject this. That, again, though, is unlikely because Vladimir Putin knows the man that is Donald Trump very well, and he will know how to engage and how to deal with this ball when it comes back. He will likely say, it's a very complex situation. We need more time. We need further discussions. But yes, in theory, we are willing to go ahead with this. So that's where we stand at the moment.
Michael, do you concur with this, that although we haven't got to this stage before in terms of a peace proposal on the table, it is following the same pattern that we have seen in the negotiations, where Ukraine agrees to stuff, but then when it goes back to Russia, it all seems to get thrown into the long grass.
Square brackets. It's all about square brackets. That Kizletsia, who's the Deputy Foreign Minister, said last night, he said, we've agreed the document, which means the 19 points that Alex was talking about is agreed, which is to say that's a document that can go back to the President. And in it are square brackets. So there's all the things we agree, and then the things that we're still stuck on are in square brackets. And the American report said a few minor details. No, the things in square brackets are the big issues, the things that they can't agree on. And so the idea is what's in square brackets is what President Zelensky and President Trump will have to talk about probably at the weekend or next week. When this big meeting happens in Washington, Zelensky goes to Washington. It'll be a really critical meeting. He's really got to go in and bat for his country because he'll have to deal with whatever's in the square brackets, the really big issues. How big will the armed forces be in Ukraine? What are they going to do about territory? Are they really going to give up the Donbass? It's a whole series of issues. Is Russia going to be the official second language? What about are war crimes going to be cancelled? All these hundreds of thousands of war crimes? I don't know, but I bet you that those are all the things in square brackets. And the things that are not in the brackets are what we agree on. That's fine. So there's a two-stage process, I think, which is that one is that Zelensky and Trump, or Zelensky's got to go to Trump and get some sort of American endorsement of this version, and then that version, with some American endorsement, goes to Russia and they reject it. And then we're back where we started. And the question then is, how angry is President Trump and who does he blame for the fact that this has run into the sand? That's where I think we're going sometime in the next 10 days. Might be wrong. I mean, maybe there'll be a breakthrough. Maybe there will. But the biggest meeting is the one between Zelensky and Trump, which is going to come up soon. Nobody's putting a date on it yet. It's got to be after Thanksgiving. So it's just about plausible. It might be over the weekend, more likely, I'm guessing, next week.
And Alex, do you think, I mean, if we do make progress on this, is this following the pattern of what we saw in Gaza, that Trump sends out his envoys, they get almost to the point, and then Trump goes out to sort of close the deal, as it were, and be there for all the big handshakes?
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to be kind about how this is working, he's putting everything out there. He's getting the wish list from the Russians of what they want. This starts as kind of the outer realms of what this discussion is going to be, and then you work backwards and you try and meet somewhere in between and you try and get a deal. But I mean, it's
the complete reversal of the way diplomacy normally works.
It's very, very, very unorthodox. I mean, normally, look, wind back for the Middle East peace process and look at Oslo. Weeks and weeks, months and months of negotiations between diplomats before anybody even got close to announcing anything. In this case, what we're seeing is just the huge announcement very, very quickly, and then actually people scratching their heads, what's all this about? This seems very far removed from the reality of where anybody thinks that an agreement can really be made practically. So, yeah, it's extraordinarily unorthodox. Will it work in this case? I think it is different to the totally, Gaza case.
Yeah. Much bigger issue.
Yeah. And also, I think the Ukrainians, contrary to what Donald Trump says, do actually have some cards to play. They do have European allies. Losing America completely would be a disaster, but not necessarily the end of the story. They still have a vote. They still have a say.
It's known as diplomacy by envoy, as opposed to diplomacy by diplomats. So the State Department is almost moribund in this case. The National Security Council in America is a shadow of its former self. And all the diplomacy has been worked out by envoys. In other words, somebody that Trump picks because he trusts them. They've come from a different area of business or whatever it might be. No diplomatic background, but they've got the president's ear, and he sends out these powerful people, powerful to him, and it's diplomacy by envoy. And professional diplomacy just stands aside and has to somehow pick up the pieces when the envoys have agreed something. It's completely different. It doesn't always go wrong. I mean, Richard Holbrooke was an envoy, and he was a really tough, vicious character. But my goodness, he knew his stuff. And, you know, he was in the 1990s and the year 2000s. And Holbrooke was a real bully, but he was effective because he did his background work. He had years of experience behind him. He was a really effective envoy. Some of these envoys have come from completely different areas, and they're thrown into world politics, and they're up against Russian professionals. You know, Russian professional diplomats who've been doing this for years. And, of course, they wipe the floor with them.
I mean, Lavrov is one of the most experienced diplomats in the world, and he's dealing with people like Steve Witkoff. So
who's a very nice man.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean to say he knows what he's talking about in diplomacy, but he's a genuinely nice man. Trump trusts him, and he's a good real estate man. But in the world of global politics, no.
I think the other thing that's worth bearing in mind, underpinning all of this, is the question about Donald Trump's attention span. If this doesn't go his way, if momentum doesn't gather, if this initiative doesn't look as though it is going towards a solution, what does he do next? Does he just lose interest and walk away? I mean, I think that's the big question.
Yeah. Well, we've been saying for a while, he's zigzagging his way out of this war.
Indeed.
And, you know, all zigzags, and the zigzags matter because whether he's on a zig or a zag when he leaves the whole scene will depend on who he blames.